everybody, and welcome for this new webinar hosted by Hydrogen Business for Climate. So we're going to discuss deployment in the field of hydrogen for 1 hour and a half. So you can see here the name of the different speakers. So welcome again. So we're going to address during this session heavy duty mobility. We're going to discuss multimodal H2 stations, multimodal because not only stations for cars or for buses, but for different kind of vehicles, including why not trains and maybe planes in the future. We're going, of course, to discuss infrastructure, how to deploy stations worldwide. Of course, we're going to discuss also the Chinese situation, because China today is leading the way and investing more and more. And we're going to look what's going on in Netherlands with hydrogen valleys. And to conclude, of course, we'll discuss the point how to get massive green hydrogen. So this is the menu for this new webinar. First, we carry on with the heavy duty mobility. So it's time to call Bart Biebeck from Brussels at the FEHGU. Hello, Bart.
Hello, hello. Great to be here.
Director from the FEHGU, which stands for Fuel Cell and Hydrogen Joint Undertaking. First, can you explain what is this organization and how it can help for hydrogen deployment?
Well, the Fuel Cells and Hydrogen Joint Undertaking is basically a public-private partnership. So we have 3 partners with whom we work. It's first of all a public side, which is European Commission, which is of course very important because they put the money on the table, then which we can then support financially projects. And the other 2 partners are basically private partners. It's Hydrogen Europe Industry, 250 industrial organizations, and then we have Hydrogen Europe Research is around 80 research organizations. Basically, what we are doing is we're supporting financially projects in the research field, of course, of fuel cells and hydrogen. By today, we have funded 285 projects for around 1.07 billion euro. And since this is a public-private partnership, of course, it's also the private members needs to put in equal amount of money. We work in energy field, transport field, and the cross-cutting field is more a bit of horizontal issues around standardization, safety, and education. So how can we help to, of course, to accelerate the famous hydrogen economy we are all talking about? Is basically, well, when we support R&I, the idea is to accelerate the development of those technologies. You know that still several technologies are expensive, so we need to do the cost reduction. Also, we need to help to scale up the manufacturing. So we also look into technologies, how we can manufacture faster and with a good quality, of course. But also we do demonstration projects. And so we have a couple of big demonstration projects where we put a fleet of cars, a fleet of buses in the field, and we also provide the infrastructure and really test it to show, to demonstrate that it works, because this is the way how you can convince then later people who wants to buy this kind of technology, that you really show, look, it works, you know, and without any problem.
Maybe to start, we can discuss the JIVE and JIVE 2 program, because it's about buses and it works very well.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, the JIVE and the JIVE 1 was actually one of our latest projects on buses, where we really want to put hundreds of buses in the field. Actually, to be exact, that's around 256 buses. But before that, before we arrived at this point, of course, we had smaller projects really started on more than 10 years ago. I mean, I remember at that time, the first bus in the CHIC project was 1.8 million euro. Of course, at that time, nobody wants to buy such kind of bus, but we need to show it that that the technology works. And we have done several projects in between, and each time we reduced the cost of the bus. And now with JIVE 2, we reached basically a cost of around 500,000 euro for a bus. And we know now that when cities will order now hundreds of buses as a next step, that we can get even below the 500,000 euro and actually being competitive at other zero emission technology. So what we actually did is, coming from a very early research stage to bring it to basically a commercial position now. And for us, buses is now completely commercial, and it's great to see, because we have, I said, the city of Essen, for example, recently in Germany, they ordered 100 hydrogen buses. I know from another city 200 hydrogen buses. So you see that basically now it's gone. Huh? For us now in the buses, of course, we need to look now to coaches, and that's something new. The challenge in coaches is very different than city buses, what we have done so far.
Okay, one word about cars and stations through the HME program.
Yeah, the H2ME program is really an activity where we try to coordinate in Europe among several countries where to position the hydrogen refueling stations, and also to put at the same time a number of cars at those stations, so that basically the station can be used in a sustainable way. So in that project, we put it 50 stations, 50 hydrogen refueling stations in various countries, being in countries really up to the north, like in Norway, but also in Scandinavia, but also in Iceland. So very harsh conditions, very cold, see how it works. But also in France, in Germany, UK. So we really wanted to test several environmental conditions, but also various business cases, because each country has different taxation schemes for cars, or even for fuels. So what we did was really also putting around those stations a number of cars, and totally we will fund 1,400 cars for all those stations. And a big part of those cars are range extenders. So that means you have basically a battery car where you put a small fuel cell in addition. And so that basically those vehicles, which are basically vans in the current form, that can drive longer than only with battery. And we see that there's a business case as well for that. But we wanted to learn from that. How are people using those type of cars? And I think it was very successfully, because that led now, I mean, I think you know it, the Stellantis announced very recently the Opel and Peugeot and Citroën, now they will come with this type of vehicle. And I think, again, our program or this project really demonstrated that is a viable solution, and a solution that people want. And so then you see again the uptake and to go to commercialization.
So FTHGU has been a starter. And another key application is for fleets of taxis, and you've been supporting the Zephyr program.
Yeah, the Zephyr program, and also earlier as well, other projects. But what we wanted to do is really to support taxi fleets. So why taxi fleets is because we see that hydrogen will play a very important role in the passenger car, especially when the vehicles are used in high intensive use. High intensive use, well, clearly a taxi is as intensive use. So, and we see that, for example, in Paris, the hype taxis that I'm sure you know about them, we have really supported them. We saw that this was a good model because there's a lot of takeoff of the hydrogen. And so now we wanted to replicate what we have done, tried first in Paris, now in other parts of Europe. Like in the UK, also we tried to do something similar in Brussels. We will go also probably to Copenhagen. So you see other capitals in Europe are now actually copying something that was really kickstarted in Paris in an earlier project. So the Zephyr project is about basically try the same model in other capitals.
So the next step, and maybe the next success, is about trucks, H2 trucks with the H2 hole.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Basically, what we want to try to do is to replicate what we did with the buses, really starting from very basic, and then try to reduce the cost until you can go then to commercialization. So we just started actually. I mean, H2O was the first project where we really wanted to demonstrate 15 trucks. Really in the field. I think it's in 4 different countries that we will try them with 2 manufacturers. One is Iveco, the other one is VDL. With 2 European fuel cell stack providers as well. So it's really a European project. And the idea is that they build now the first trucks, put it on the road and test them with real customers. One customer will be, for example, BMW in Germany, will really test them in their facilities. So yeah, I'm looking forward really, or also Carrefour in France, by the way, will also use those trucks. So I'm looking forward to see the results. But of course, this is not where we will end. The next step is really to have this bigger fleets of demonstrations like we had with the Jive buses. I believe that this should be our next step.
Thank you, Bob Bibuck, for being with us today. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Okay, as you have guessed, we had to record earlier this interview because Bart was not available. He had a meeting at the same time, but thanks again for him to be with us. Okay, I would like now to ask a question to Pierre-Etienne Franc. Pierre-Etienne, you were a former exec from Air Liquide and you were the General Secretary from the Hydrogen Council. We will discuss your new occupation in a few minutes, but first maybe a comment about heavy-duty mobility. We can see that hydrogen is arriving in buses, but also on trucks.
Well, I think we have an interesting dynamic in Europe, but we should not forget what's going on in the rest of the world, because honestly, we often say that the beauty of Europe is that we get a very good vision on strategic thinking, but it's sometimes more difficult to implement. And it's true that in the last 10 years, thanks to the FCH GU, which I know very well because I was in charge a couple of years ago to manage it with Bart, we have hundreds of buses and a couple of trucks. But in China, in 3 years, they have achieved, I think, more than 5,000 or 6,000 trucks and buses which are running every day. The trucks are not heavy-duty trucks. It's more, I would say, medium-duty vehicles to do the urban deliveries. The buses are numerous and they continue to increase their dynamic there. I think Korea has also catched up very significantly over the last 2 years with a massive development of infrastructure and start of big deployments of buses. Hyundai is leading the show on heavy-duty trucks with, I think, this time Switzerland has the biggest field for implementation, but maybe some around the table know better than me. So it's true that heavy-duty mobility is probably the next frontier for us, but we need to make sure that Europe is walking the talk rapidly, putting in place rapidly the incentives to enable those projects to come on stream. And we need not only, of course, the support for the OEMs to move, but we need to find a way to revive or re-accelerate the notion of PPPs or things like that to enable the infrastructure to be partly financed. Because the big trouble remains this loading factor for the infrastructure. But maybe the last element is that the heavy-duty truck is facing a small, I would say, topic, which is what's going to be the end game in terms of type of delivery of hydrogen. Is it going to be 350 bar? Is it going to be 700 bar? Or is it going to be liquid? And we need to be careful there, because if we change too fast from one techno to another, we are basically impairing significant investment done by the industry upfront. And sometimes le mieux est l'ennemi du bien, as we say in French. So high pressure is maybe less good in terms of autonomy than liquid storage, but it has some advantages, is that we know it, we've mastered it, we've developed it, we have a start of the stations. The US is developing mostly high pressure based trucks. They have different ways of loading the trucks with more space for the reservoirs, because the roads are bigger, the space is larger globally in the US. But I think we should be careful before going too fast into the liquid-based reservoir, even though it has some interest. So yes, promising, critical, because we need heavy duty to load faster the stations, but we should not forget too fast the light duty, heavy intensive mobility solution like commercial vehicles that now I think the Stellantis and others are pushing for. The taxi fleet, which as you know, have been sponsoring for the last couple of years with Picardy, is also a very nice example of a significant chicken or egg dilemma solution, I would say.
Thank you, Pierre-Etienne, for this first statement. I would like now to turn the floor to Patrick Knoben. So you're based in Netherlands, in Groningen. We will discuss later on what is new energy for new coalition for energy, of course. I would like to ask you a question about what's going on with trucks in Rotterdam, because there is a project to have a huge fleet of trucks.
Yes. Well, good morning, and thank you for the organization to invite me. Sorry, I'm squeezing around my camera. Yes, looking at Rotterdam, there is a very big project initiated by Air Liquide to bring to, let's say, the market, so to say, 1,000 trucks. The project is called High Truck, and I think it's a very, very interesting project because it intends to, let's say, facilitate the market with a lot of vehicles, which is of course, let's say, not a cakewalk. It's a difficult project because first you have to have the trucks, and then you have to take them into operation, and you need to have commercial parties, let's say, driving around with the trucks. But this project is about 1,000, so initiated and let's say managed by Air Liquide. The three key harbors in that project are the Port of Rotterdam, the Port of Duisburg in North Rhine-Westphalia. Duisburg is the biggest inland port in Europe, and Antwerp is connected. And there are, let's say, a vast number of European OEMs, some truck manufacturers are involved. I cannot name them all because otherwise I would, let's say, risk forgetting someone, and I don't want to do that. But it's very, very interesting, and there is a website which also gives some more insights. And so I think this is a game-changing project because it's so big, it's fast, and it connects, let's say, ports to ports. Not only, let's say, the waterway transport, but of course the road transport with the heavy trucks of, let's say, the 40-ton container trucks, and it comprises actually that route of the containers, but also the trucks which go inside into the cities, like the food trucks, to let's say support provide, let's say, the groceries to the supermarkets. Let's say we have one in the Netherlands called Albert Heijn or Albert Heijn de Leyze, Ahold Delhaize. Of course, you got several others in Europe, amongst which Bart mentioned. So I think this is a very exemplary project in which the industry takes up the challenge, and it's an interesting challenge, and we really would like to support that from our region because we are not, let's say, included in the Rotterdam region, but the Netherlands is quite a small country, so we need to work together, and actually that's the basis of hydrogen. If you cannot share, you cannot multiply. This is something we need to do together.
Thank you. One question for François Goncy. So you are part of the EDF group, so it's an electricity provider. What is the strategy in order to decarbonize heavy-duty mobility?
Hello, Laurent. Hello, everybody. That's a pleasure to be among such a good company today. So thank you to invite me, and I'm happy to participate. So as you mentioned, I'm in charge of customer activities for the EDF group in the east of France. That means that, well, to answer in one sentence to your question, as you know, we are I would say, low carbon energy company. So if I had to answer in one question to you, in one sentence to your question, is that we do provide the energy, usually the electricity, and the solution to make it happen. That means decarbonize the heavy duty transport. You need really low carbon or green electricity first, and the solution to transform it to mobility. More precisely, then, let's take the example of one of my clients. In France today, most of the projects to decarbonize heavy-duty transport comes from public authorities, usually municipalities, as mentioned by your first guests on the beginning of the session, mainly from buses. That's the first question usually. So they come to us saying, let's say, tell me some advices, examples, analysis to decarbonize my buses, my trucks, and so on. So usually we compare, this is our job, we compare solution with electricity first, electrical buses against hydrogen. Sometimes, let's say, we are not technological driven, we compare both and we provide solution for both. So as today is for is a webinar about hydrogen. For hydrogen, when the client finally opts for hydrogen solution, hydrogen buses, trucks, and so on, we mainly, in the value chain, we mainly provide upstream and midstream solutions to bring the low carbon hydrogens or green hydrogens to very next to the consumers. We do that through a subsidiary, which is Hynamics, able to build, operate, and maintain its own electrolyzers, or to provide services of operating and maintenance to electrolyzers belonging to our clients. That's the first thing. And the second thing, for persons, let's say, knowing perfectly how to provide and produce the hydrogen, we also provide the green electricity or the decarbonized electricity. Maybe we will talk about that later. To have a low carbon hydrogen at competitive costs. And last, since now, for I think for 5 years even, we are also the reference shareholder of McPhy, which is an electrolyzer manufacturer in France, important electrolyzer manufacturer, and we are happy to work together with our research and development and with them as an industrial to, let's say, as your webinar is about scaling up hydrogen to provide very big industrial solutions for everybody.
Thank you. Thierry Lepers, any comment on heavy-duty mobility deployment?
Sure. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. We have to start from the customers. Who is buying those systems, those buses, those trucks, and the trucking industry is extremely price sensitive. It's a very low margin business. They don't care about saving the planet. They care about surviving as companies, because they have very, very thin margins. The minute you offer them a system that reduces their TCO, the total cost of ownership of their trucks, they move. But until then, nobody moves. So it's a very complex situation. It's a binary situation. Either you have something, and that has to be a system. So you need, for instance, the trucks, you need the charging stations, you need the fueling stations, you need the hydrogen itself, you need the financing. All of this needs to come together and make it a very attractive proposition to for hundreds of thousands of trucks. Because if you don't get there, you don't have the volumes. So it's a circle. You know, it's a chicken and egg situation. Where do you get the volumes? Because you have the cost. Where do you get the cost? Because you have the volumes. And the solution from that is not simple. It's not simple. It has to be done at the same time. Everyone needs to come together. And again, the manufacturers will not ramp up massively their capacity. You know, the Hyzons, the Hyundai, the Toyotas of the world will not ramp up their capacity unless they have the comfort that customers are going to rush into buying their product. And same thing goes with infrastructures. Infrastructures need to be in place for fueling stations, and most importantly, the product itself. So in a nutshell, there is a very, very direct connection between mobility and the price of the product, because in the TCO of a truck, fuel is around 70%. 70% is the fuel cost. So if you have a fuel cost at €5 per kilogram, forget it. It will never happen. If you have a fuel cost delivered to at the pump level at 2.5 pre-tax, then you're switching. You know, that's the tipping point. 2.5 euros. You've asked to those truck operators, they're saying 2.5, I will switch, provided obviously I'll have the right price. But unless it's 2.5, I won't get there. Now 2.5 has to include the fueling stations. So that means that unless you have a hydrogen delivered in very, very large quantities, at 1.5, then you don't get it. So there again, the message here, it's a systems approach. It's not just one project here, one project. It has to be seen as a systemic way. And by the way, same thing for the deployment of refueling stations. If you have a few refueling stations, it won't work. You need to have an operational system, pan-European system of thousands of fueling stations if you want this system to work. So there again, the step is very high. And the question is, can we overcome that in the next 5 years? My personal conviction is that it will happen. But there again, let's look at the systemic approach.
Thank you. A quick question for Patrick Nuben, because I can see a nice picture behind you. It's a Normandy boat, a Normandy vessel. So are you convinced that hydrogen can be applied for boats as well?
Yes, and I think in principle, hydrogen can offer solutions for all applications of, let's say, oil-based liquid fuels. Although these kinds of objects are quite, let's say, a challenge because they are very big, and you need to have vast quantities of hydrogen available, probably in a liquid or a liquidized form. But I would also like to reflect to Mr. Lepecq's remark. I fully agree that it needs to be, the cost needs to be as low as possible, probably less than 2.5 euros per kilogram pre-tax, and maybe looking at the pre-tax domain. I think it would be very wise for Europe to harmonize tax on fuels. And maybe we should also, maybe it's a bit off cue, ask for a full and endured exemption for hydrogen as a fuel for trucks. We need to pull all the strings together to do that. And for instance, in maritime fuels, they are free of levies or duties. So why not, in the first, let's say, 10 years, have a full exemption for hydrogen as a fuel all over Europe? So no, let's say, discrepancies between countries, because it makes no sense if one country has a taxation and 1 meter across the border there is no taxation. That isn't the level playing field. So I do very much agree on Mr. Lepecq. It's a systemic approach, not only from the technology, but also from the financial aspects.
Okay, so we're going now to turn the floor to Bruno Jamet from the Vehicle of the Future cluster. Do we have any questions, Bruno?
Yes, we have 2 questions. The first is for Pierre-Etienne Franc. Someone would like to detail his vision on the use cases for liquid or pressurized hydrogen in mobility.
The use case, well, in fact, it's not very different than gaseous storage. And I think that's exactly the point that Thierry made, is that the issue is not really the technologies, the customer experience. So with liquid, you might load the vehicles a little bit faster than with high pressure gas. And normally with liquid, you have a better density, so you're going to store more energy in the same volume, so you will increase the autonomy probably by a few hundred more kilometers. So you're making the long distance heavy duty truck easier to develop, because you don't need to stop every 500 kilometers, even though the truck drivers usually should stop every 500 kilometers because he has to make his rest. But it changes also the dynamic of the station infrastructure to build up. You might need less stations. The topic being, however, that the cost of those stations, very heavy liquid stations, might not be so much cheaper than the cost of gas stations, because you've got a couple of technical constraints. So autonomy better, time to refuel maybe a little bit better, but cost of the hydrogen, which is one of the big, I know, fight that Thierry is pushing to get the price of hydrogen at level which is very, very, very aggressive. So it might not improve so much the cost of hydrogen because of some of the technical constraints. So there is a debate between the OEM world, between I would say basically Daimler is pushing that very strongly because they believe it's the right solution. Other truck OEMs are more silencious or even against. So I am not a truck expert, so I'm not going to say what should be the one, but it's true that liquid is bringing benefits, but I'm not sure it's so easy to manage in terms of infrastructure.
Okay, Bruno, second question.
Lots of questions. The next one is for Thierry Leperc concerning the pragmatic approach concerning TCO. How do you see the influence of cost-free measures like regulations?
Getting something about taxes, you could say I want tax-free hydrogen. That's sure. Now, if you go to governments and say, you know what, we're going to replace diesel, which is heavily a big source of income, with hydrogen, which is no source of income, who's going to make it up for the loss? And we all know that diesel and other and other things are very important. So we're all stuck. If hydrogen is very small, so the loss of revenue is small. It's okay. But the problem is that if it's small, you don't get the volumes, you don't get the cost. So the only way it can work is that if every trucking company wants to go hydrogen, every single one, because it makes sense. It makes sense from an economic standpoint. And if it remains small, then it doesn't work. So that's where regulation from that standpoint, in my opinion, has to stand out of the way and make it possible for market players to work. And for me, the collaboration that we need to have is a collaboration between industry. Who needs to be involved? We need to have, obviously, the hydrogen generation. We'll talk about it later, and transmission to bring the product. We need I was having this conversation with HRS a couple of days ago. We need a mass scale deployment of refueling stations in strategic areas. And for instance, in logistics platforms, we're talking to logistics platforms companies. There's a very, very strong case to put all these refueling stations where the trucks come, but you need to have the right level of things, and it has to be coordinated. Should that be coordinated by governments? Maybe. I think ultimately it's value chain players who need to get together and work on it. And then the next question is, how do you get the volumes of trucks? And we're talking here about fleets. So there is a special role, in my opinion, for large trucking companies that should go, one of those major trucking companies, or a few of them, or organized, should go and see, for instance, both the truck suppliers and the refueling station suppliers, say, we are going big. We want hundreds of thousands of your trucks. We're going to aggregate demand. And this is, for me, far more powerful when it's industry which does it. Also, what we need, by the way, is the support of financial institutions, because all these trucks will need financing. So you need to have the leasing companies involved. So this is far more an industry organization than a government-driven thing. And I'm not sure that government is the best, the best people to run a trucking company. Trucking companies are not run by government. I mean, this idea that you're going to have government or government officials who know hardly anything about trucking being involved in that is wrong. So that puts the onus, the responsibility on industry, which needs to get together, not just in conferences and saying things about, we're going to save the planet. No. Volumes, getting back volumes, orders, infrastructure deployment. That's the weight is on industry, in my opinion.
Thank you, Thierry. I'm sorry, Pierre-Etienne, but time is running and we have to shift to the next topic. But if we have time at the end of the conference, maybe we will turn the floor to you. So let's carry on now with multimodal H2 station. Thank you. And it's time to get back to François Gonxy from EDF, because we're going to take a local example in France. It takes place in Auxerre. It's in Burgundy-Franche-Comté region, and it will be a station deployed not only for buses but for all kinds of vehicles. Please go on.
Yes, thank you, Laurent. If you allow me as an introduction, just to start with a panorama. As I mentioned, Hynamics today. So Hynamics is the EDF subsidiary working on electrolyzers. Is working today on 9 very advanced projects, 8 in France, 1 in Germany. representing all together the first stage of all those projects. They are not far from 50 megawatts. Among those two projects, there are two projects dedicated to decarbonization of large industrial plants, so this is not expected today, and 7 are mainly dedicated to decarbonization of local mobility sectors. That's the case for Auxerre, that's also the case for Belfort, Cannes, Loire-Vallée, Gardanne, Nice, Montpellier. That means that for us, this is the beginning of my introduction, what Thierry mentioned, that means the beginning of the volumes, is really driven at this stage for local mobility sectors, and I have to say public transportation first. So this is the main driver today. In the future, we'll see. That means when I say local mobility sector, that means buses, refuse collectors, a bit later, in a few years, trains, trucks, and let's say that's the scale of a urban area or a local territory, a department if in France, or a region. All these 9 projects where I talked about are at a quite advanced stage. They all receive support from either the European Commission, Connecting Europe Facility, or for the French Agency for Ecological Transition, the ADEME. And of course, we are very proud of the trust we gain from these two institutions. All those projects share common characteristics. They are all joint projects between local government, authorities, and players from the industry. And that means that those are not EDF projects. They are local projects joining efforts from public and private players. And they all start with a reliable, simple first stage, for example, where hydrogen is used only for buses. And from this first stage, we grow in the future, aggregating more and more new consumers. That means that the project is, let's say, made to be progressively scalable. And this is the other common point with all those projects. So after this introduction, if we now go a bit more into the Auxerre project a bit in detail, because that was your question. So the Auxerre project is in the first phase. The project is finally modest because it will be online by the end of this summer. It's a first 1 megawatt electrolyzer producing 400 kilo per day of green hydrogen. That's for 5 buses to start, commercial vehicles, and some trucks. That's the first phase. That's the seed to go further. And then this project will scale up in the future, probably to 3 megawatt electrolyzer, maybe to 5 megawatts. That means around 1 ton per day. First, because there will be progressively more and more buses from the cities that will switch to hydrogen first. And second, from 2024, there will be 3 regional trains using electricity and hydrogen that will enter into circulation not far from the station, and the trains are already financed by the region and bought by EDF to Alstom, by SNCF, sorry, to Alstom. And second, third, because the station is quite close to one of the main highway between Paris and the south of France. And finally, that was one of your questions, because the station is close to the river Yonne, when you can also aggregate boat hydrogen consumption for boats. in this project, the EDF Group build and operate the electrolyzers and the station, the multimodal station. But of course, the interesting point for the OCR project is that around this station and beyond the electrolyzer, what we do ourselves, there is, I think, a remarkable ecosystem in place. First, because Berthier is creating in Auxerre the first maintenance center for hydrogen buses in France. And it's quite important because you have to reinsure let's say the drivers and the operators of the buses. So to have the maintenance center very close to the buses, it's important. It's first for Safra buses, but it will progressively extend for trucks and other manufacturers. So first, the first maintenance centers in France. Second, because in Auxerre, you have also another industrial who is Fruos, one of the main trailer manufacturers in France and in Europe. He's based in Auxerre and is working very close together with the hydrogen ecosystem in Auxerre. And third, because there is a retrofit center for diesel trucks now emerging to convert old, let's say 5 years old trucks, diesel trucks, to hydrogen and electrical trucks. And last, because all needed training programs are planned, that means from very simple courses, training courses for bus drivers to specificities of hydrogen drivers, that's important, but also for the future, we have also worked to integrate hydrogen issues on the courses of on local educational institution to prepare the future specialists for maintenance, security issues, industrial engineering, and so on. That is, you see, you have the consumers growing, the industry and manufacturers growing, the educational tissue around, let's say, putting all that together for the future. That is really, I think, from a very small project, splendid ecosystem with a splendid implication, I have to say, from the Auxerre city and from the Burgundy-Franche-Comté region. They both have, let's say, a major implication on the political vision and make it real. Because as
thanks for all these details. So it's all in one station. I would like now to turn the floor to Patrick Knuben, because there is a project for building a hydrogen station at the airport in Croningen.
Yes. Well, thank you again. Indeed, we have several hydrogen fueling stations in view to be, let's say, built and operated, of course. And one of that will be connected to our regional airport, and that's very interesting because that's also related to, let's say, preparing us to be developed to have, let's say, aviation on hydrogen in the foreseeable future, because that will take some time. By putting a fueling station in a multimodal node, to say that we have one which can fuel, let's say, one dispenser on the air side, as we call it, and one on the land side of the airport, makes a lot of sense. And in view, on top of that, this fueling station will be incorporated, embedded in our Hydrogen Valley project, which comprises the full value chain, as from, let's say, production, logistics, transport, storage, large-scale storage, and use in industry, mobility, and built environment. So we are trying to build this ecosystem, and because that's the only way it will work in a dedicated region. And I think what is interesting here is this fueling station at the airport will have, let's say, various customers. Thereby the commercial attractiveness will be more, let's say, feasible. Otherwise, you will only have, let's say, one side, and that's a very critical business case, and we want to, let's say, see if we can even increase it, because also the hydrogen buses in the region drive around here, because we will have in operation next year about 30 hydrogen fueled buses in the region, which of course need fueling stations. There are two big ones being constructed, but it's also interesting to have one intermediate and several, of course, to be, let's say, potential backups when something needs, let's say, overhauling or maintenance, etc. And so that's the case with the airport. So it will be there, I hope. Well, will take a year or so, or 2 years, depends on let's say how the development goes. But we're very proud of that, and thereby we have a Hydrogen Valley airport, which also is a very interesting attractor for interested parties like investors.
Okay, maybe a quick reaction from Pierre-Etienne and Thierry, if they wish to make a comment about multimodal.
I'm going to have a comment. I'm sorry, I'm going to be politically incorrect. 50 years ago, when we built infrastructures for highways, for nuclear power plants, for gas transmission, for airports, we didn't do valleys. There was no Romorantin nuclear valley. There was no smallish valley project and saying, you know what, let's do it in the countryside. This idea, I mean, no offense to what in France we glorify as territoire, the idea that large companies and national governments are abdicating their responsibility in developing mass-scale infrastructures to local governments who have no competence, no funding, and no global vision. Sorry to say that. They're very nice, but they're not the ones. Saying that the future of energy in Europe relies on those small valleys, for me, I spent a lot of time in China and the US. That's not the way it works in China. I can tell you. It's not the way. If Europe wants to be nice like that, well, Europe is going to be completely left behind. So I'm going to be very serious. Now is the time to go past these valleys. Valleys are smallish things. Valleys need to be supported by government. Valleys are not industrial policy. Industrial policy should come. There should be leadership. And right now, what we see at the European level is, sorry to say that, a lack of leadership. The hydrogen plants that have been launched are today rather empty when it comes to infrastructures. What I was saying about how you deploy mass-scale refueling stations across Europe is nowhere. I mean, we're basing that on Valley. So let's forget about Valley. Let's look at what the US just announced. A $4 trillion infrastructure plan. Where is Europe? Europe is nowhere to be seen. The US is marching. China is marching. Europe is doing Valley. That's not at all what we need.
Okay, thank you for this point of view. Pierre-Etienne, maybe one quick word?
My point is that I cannot disagree with what Thierry says. I think, but I would like Thierry to be consistent, because just the former intervention, you were saying let the industry move, but that's wrong. It's only if there is a massive
leadership. Sorry, you need leadership, you need political vision and leadership, but let industry do the things. But you need a vision, you need a plan, un grand projet, as we say in France. You know, this word grand projet was something that we structured our minds. I'm not saying that we should go back to government étatiste, dirigiste ways of 50 years ago, but we should go back to the vision that the people had at that time, and now obviously have industry, not smallish governments. Forget about small government. You need to have industry. Sorry.
My proposal, because we're going to hear more from Pierre-Etienne in a few seconds, because time is running, let's do the Q&A session right now, and let's turn the floor to Bruno Jamet to see if he has some questions from the audience. So, Bruno.
Yes, just a very short question about the Auxerre ecosystem, about the electricity. Is it coming from wind or other source?
Yes, that's good question. It's coming Actually, when you build the contracts to supply green electricity to electrolyzer, you have to combine several sources of electricity. So it's a combination, and it will move. This combination will evolve with the project as the project will scale up in the future. So it comes from green electricity produced in France, combined with green electricity produced in the Bourgogne-Franche-Comté region. And when the project will be a bit bigger, we will combine that with very precise farms. At this stage, it does not come from a very precise plant. It comes from let's say a basket of plants from France in general and from the Bourgogne-Franche-Comté region.
Okay, let's
combining greens, that means combining wind and solar power plants.
Okay, so several kind of new renewable energies and all-in-one station. We get it. So let's carry on now with how to accelerate H2 infrastructure. And it's time to hear from Pierre-Etienne Franc, not as a former Air Liquide or Hydrogen Council, but head of a new investment called 5T Hydrogen. So Pierre-Etienne, the announcement has been made only a few weeks ago. Can you please tell us how you decided to create such a invest fund first?
So bouncing back on what we discussed just before, I could not finish my statement because Thierry jumped in, but I think it's exactly the topic of trying to find the leadership and to make sure that indeed the need to move to scale is properly captured and that we have a couple of players playing the catalyst. So the idea is to say that those projects, even if at scale they're getting better, they're not always solving all the technical issues or the profitability issues that industrial players want. So there needs to be a risk-sharing mechanism, and there is to be partners coming from the financial world to help bridge the gap to profitability and to work with project financing schemes. So the idea is to put together a fund, infrastructure-driven, which is going to invest only on projects, mostly greenfield projects, so enabling those projects to move at scale. So investing only in projects where the minimum amount of the project is in between 100 to 200 million, which is even, it is big or not so big because the scale projects that we look at in the future should be gigawatt size or hundreds of stations or even more. But the idea is that if you bring together industry players and LPs in a fund, basically providing a wish to co-invest with financial LPs who want to move into the new, I would say, investment topic of the decade, which is hydrogen related. And if you look at those equipments, projects, plans, which might be seen as a venture topic today, if you look at them 10 years down the road, with the belief that we all have that hydrogen is going to become unavoidable, then those assets become an infra play. And the fund is there to enable that, to take those projects which are risky and to bring them to the situation where they have become infrastructure assets because they are loaded, the technology has been de-risked, the reliability has been improved, and they are delivering steady cash flows. So this is the purpose of the fund. It's going to be raising, we expect 1 to 1.5 billion euro. We have already got a couple of intents from a couple of US investors, but we expect, of course, to get some also from European and Asian ones. We're going to invest in the places where indeed you've got the mix of a political and industry leadership with the right regulations, with the right support schemes, and the willingness of key players to invest massively, because let's be serious. If we don't invest massively now, the thing's not going to happen, and then the energy transition will not be solved, and we will be delayed in every single element of the equation. We will have also, the bet is that we do a pure play fund. We're not doing a generalist one, mixing everything with hydrogen as a part of it, which then would always give an alternative to invest in something else than hydrogen, because hydrogen is more difficult. So it's focused on hydrogen, it's pure play, upstream, downstream, working as a minority player most of the time. in all the countries which have the right regulation, as I said, and over 10, 12 years. So with that, if you basically bring on the table 1 to 1.5 billion euro and you are minority investors with some capex support or funding support from the policymakers, plus some project finance in some of the topic, not all, but some of them could be project finance, then you're in fact triggering the ability to move on 10 billion worth of projects, which is significant in the current context, and which is going to enable to move at scale. The last element, and I will stop there, the beauty of a fund is that you have no other choice than to invest in a way, because when you get the money, you need to make it work. So it doesn't mean we're going to invest in stupid things, but at least we are going to invest rapidly in hydrogen-related topics at scale, which is exactly what we need to make things succeed. So now I'm just waiting for the LPs to come, chasing them, of course. And I'm very excited to learn about all the projects that are on the table. And I guess we heard about some of them, and more to come, I guess, in the next discussions.
Pierre-Etienne, you already have partners, including Plug Power, and your target is to have 1 billion euros, maybe in a few months.
Yes. So today we have gathered around 400 million euros worth of intents. Of course, it needs to be converted into a final fund opening. We will really open the fund into marketing phase in the summer, and we expect indeed to get around 1 billion with almost mostly industrial, but we will then try to increase the size with financial LPs as well. We are relatively confident, even though you never know. The topic will be to find the right projects and the right scale projects at the right time, because the issue is to go step by step into very large scale projects.
Okay, so gentlemen in the panel, any reaction to this initiative, an investment focusing on infrastructure? Mr. Leperc, maybe?
I think it's a great initiative. You know, congratulations, Pierre-Etienne. I think there is today a missing link. And we have tons of infrastructure funds today who are very happy to invest in highways, in ports, in hospitals, in all these very useful things. And we have, as I said, lots of smallish projects and project financing, and something which is at scale is lacking. So I think you're making the right move. There is an immense need. I can tell you that it's not billions of euros which are to be needed. It's at least hundreds of billions. Obviously, banks on the lending side will have to contribute. And what is at stake here is what is the financial ecosystem which is going to drive that revolution. And today, industry technology is very important, but finance is probably just as important. And bringing together those institutional investors who today want to put money in long-term cash flows. You know what? If you're putting your investments in energy today, you have two horrible solutions. One is to put your money into fossil fuels, which is the sure way to lose everything. And people know that, and you've seen the stock prices of those oil and gas companies that have been cratering. The other one is to invest in solar or wind power, which is seeing its value, the value of those electrons collapse. Last year saw a record negative pricing in Europe. Why? Because of solar and wind. You have skyrocketing capacity in Spain today in solar power, which is having a very negative impact on solar, on power pricing. So if you want to lose your money today, put that in solar and wind power as well. So the question is, where do I want to put my money if I want to invest in energy? You want to put it in a molecule, because a molecule is what does everything. A molecule can be stored for months. A molecule can be transmitted for 5,000 kilometers with a pipe or more with a ship. That's an amazing thing that you can do with a molecule. And then obviously you want that molecule to be competitive, and it's zero carbon. Now, if you have a zero carbon, that's zero carbon oil, basically we're talking about, or oil, gas, and coal. That is very attractive to investors. So I'm sure Pierre-Etienne is going to be very successful because he's really putting the right product at the right time.
Thank you. Let's see if we have some questions from the audience. So I turn the floor again to Bruno Jamet from Vehicle of the Future cluster. Bruno?
Yes, just a short question. A few minutes ago was mentioned a target price around the 2.50 euros per kilogram, or dollars, but it's the same. This seems very low, and so the question is, what are the conditions for success in such a low price for hydrogen? If electrolysis, is there electricity price, a capex, a total volume produced? And also the question is also, do you see other means of producing H2 as an environmentally friendly way and a cost-effective way?
Oh, I think it's maybe a question addressed to Thierry, even if he's going to detail idea initiative later on.
So, well, okay, let's do some math. The clients, the truck company wants a product at 2.5 euros per kilogram in the tank. How do you get there? You need hydrogen supplied at the wholesale level at 1.5. You need to move the product through pipes, and it will cost you about 0.3, the piping, the transmission, and the storage. So that means that the maximum production price, the absolute maximum price, should be 1.2 euros per kilogram at the generation side. Now, can you do 1.2 euros with blue hydrogen? The answer is no. It doesn't work. So blue hydrogen is not that you don't like the color, but blue hydrogen is out. So that's 30 euros per megawatt hour to make the transmission. 30 euros per megawatt hour. How do you get there? If you're doing green hydrogen, that's electrolysis. You need, considering the efficiencies of the electrolyzers and the cost of the electrolyzers, it means the total power cost cannot be higher than 15 euros per megawatt hour. Which means the first thing, that you cannot connect that electrolyzer to the power grid because the cost of the power grid itself is close to that level. So it needs to be a joint location between power generation, in this case renewable, and electrolyzers feeding into the gas grid. That's where you get, because the cost of the gas grid is 10 times lower than the power grid. Moving electrons is super expensive. Storing electrons costs 1,000 times more than storing a molecule. You're so much better off with the molecule itself. Where do you get these 15 euros? Well, not from wind. You get it from solar. And where you get it from solar? Where in Europe, there are two countries, it's Spain and Portugal. So, and Southern Europe. So if you start from the market, this is, we call that design to cost. If you start from the market, it gets you to something where there's no other option. And anybody who thinks otherwise should do the math. This is grade school math. Anybody that doesn't do grade school and puts shareholder money into this thing is doing not a good service to their shareholders. Then again, let's start from the market and look at how you re-engineer a system that meets the demands of the market. There again, because if you are a higher price than that, you won't have any volumes. It's like selling oil at $200 a barrel. Who's going to buy you solar oil, great oil at $200 a barrel? It's a commodity. It comes with a price. It's binary. You're either at the right price or you're not. And in this case, we have to start from the market.
Okay, thank you. Let's carry on now, gentlemen, to China case. Let's see what's going on in this country right now. We're connected with Huiming Zhang. Hello.
Hi, how are you doing?
I'm good, thank you. So you're the executive director of the Guangdong Hydrogen Energy Institute. So you're based in the south of China. We're going to discuss what's going on in the province. But first, maybe can you remind us what is the policy in China concerning hydrogen deployment?
Okay. There are a series of the government policies from central government to province government, local governments to promote the hydrogen business development in China. It covers the incentive programs for making the hydrogen storage, transportation, refueling, also the fuel cell manufacturing business and the fuel cell vehicles business, and also for the fuel cell operation business as well. So it covers almost the whole production chain for the hydrogen business in China. Right.
Okay, so now more precisely concerning Guangdong province, what is the agenda? What is the policy?
In Guangdong, as one of the most active fuel cell activities area in China, Canton province issues a lot of incentive programs as well, which is first of all, the programs or the incentive programs covers the fuel cell vehicles operation. And this is extremely important because the fuel cell vehicles operation in China, in South China, covers the city bus business, so directly funding from the government. Also the cargo trucks, including the light truck and heavy duty trucks, and also the subway trains. And also in Guangdong, because a lot of water area like the lakes and the rivers, so right now also the Guangdong province government also initiated some programs to support the fuel cell boats and the ship development programs. So very active right now. And also in order to support this kind of fuel cell transportation, the development program, demo program, and also focus on the hydrogen refueling stations, which is the infrastructures building. Yeah.
What we can say is that the focus is on green hydrogen, which is something very new in China.
Green hydrogen is talking about use renewable energy to produce hydrogen, so to avoid the carbon emission and also the regular emissions. And this is from the big scale point of view, it is very new. It is new in 3 areas. One is the technology still needed to be further developed and more production demo must be done before we can do the real green hydrogen production. And also a lot of the legislations, like the law, the regulations must be further complete in order to use the green energy to build the local hydrogen production plants, such as combine the refueling station and the renewable energy hydrogen production together. And that needs a lot of legal works. And not such the standards, the national standards or the local standards, and that kind of standards are available right now. So we'll need to set up more standards. So I would like to say Guangdong put a lot of efforts on the R&D, the research and development right now, but talking about the commercialization still needs a lot of time. I'm thinking about like 3 to 5 years, maybe even longer. Yeah, 5 to 10 years. Yeah.
Can you tell us about the situation in Foshan city? How many vehicles and how many refueling stations?
Good question. And I'm very happy to tell you the situation in Foshan because I'm in Foshan. And right now, we have over 500 city buses running by the hydrogen power plants, so which is the biggest sector in the hydrogen fuel cell vehicles. And also almost probably like 400, maybe a little bit more than 400 trucks, the light duty trucks for the cargo purpose in Foshan as well. And Foshan builds its the first subway train powered by fuel cell power plants in Fusan nationwide. So running good right now. A lot of people just go to there to take the fuel cell train for fun. Yeah. So this is a really good sign for the fuel cells business in Fusan. And currently, I don't have the latest data, but I'm pretty sure it's almost 30 hydrogen filling stations to support the citywide fuel cell car operations.
Okay, we're talking about deployment. Is it difficult to produce enough hydrogen to power all these vehicles?
Good question. Obviously, for right now, it's not, because right now, hydrogen in China is not identified as an energy product. It's still a chemical product. So from this point of view, all the administration control by government still not, the hydrogen still not be treated as energy. So a lot of limitations for the hydrogen using. Another side, still not have enough hydrogen source to support the future hydrogen program in China. So a couple of different ways are doing right now. A lot of the giant company, the state-owned company, like the petroleum company, the electricity power company, they make the big investment to hydrogen production. So I'm expecting from right now for the next few years, we will see more, the hydrogen production rate will be like a triple or maybe even 10 times higher than current hydrogen production rate. That will be more close to support the hydrogen vehicles operation.
Okay, it looks like Guangdong province wants to create a larger hub with Macau and Hong Kong as the neighbors. Is that right?
Yes. Although I'm not sure about the government detailed plans for how to make the hydrogen program commercialization in including Hong Kong and Macau. Yeah, we already talked about in Guangdong province. So Hong Kong and Macau are still a little bit far, and really, really high population densities, and also the areas are kind of small, maybe they have different law systems. So it's a little bit difficult to synchronize their development speed piece with the made in China. But for myself, I have a few programs, just academic cooperation programs with the Hong Kong University of Technology, and we have some research programs ongoing, and the government gave a lot of fundings to support this kind of the fuel cell and hydrogen programs in academic area. So I'm pretty sure in the near future, the hydrogen program in the hydrogen commercialization in Hong Kong and Macau must be catch up.
Thank you for sharing all these information. It's been a pleasure to be with you, Mr. Zhang. Thank you again.
Thank you very much. Okay.
Okay, so we had to record earlier this interview due to connection problems, but it was very interesting to hear from China. This is a country you mentioned, Thierry Leclerc, earlier. It's a country that is going very far, very quick towards deployment.
China, I'm going to be also politically, China usually is late in doing things, but then catches up. I had the personal experience of solar, and 20 years ago, the leaders of solar deployment were Japan, Germany, and other European countries. China was nowhere to be seen. And then 10 years later, most of the large solar module manufacturers were Chinese. So this is what we are likely to see in hydrogen. And this is a warning call for Europe, because Europe today is in the same position that it was with solar 20 years ago. Government policies, pioneers, new companies, etc., doing things, and then some nice forms of success. But something was missed in terms of the scaling of the especially on the upstream side. There was a vision that it should be done for environmental reasons. The whole solar thing was pushed for mostly environmental reasons, not for industrial reasons. And suddenly the industry was lost in the midst. So I think the lesson here is that we should think about industry. And in our case, in hydrogen, it's not just upstream, electrolyzers or turbines or whatever, all the equipment that we need to do. But it's also the downstream part. What can we do with the hydrogen? Steel making, ammonia, power production. I mean, there are tons of things that these products can be used. Then again, a systemic approach. And the lesson that we had to understand from China is that industrial policy is both come from leadership, but as well this crazy Chinese spirit. And I can tell you right now, we're working with Chinese companies, some of the largest ones, and they're a bit crazy. And I personally like that. These sort of crazy things, going to moves and things. While in Europe we like local, smallish, and environmental friendly, and we like to protect the planet, etc. But it's not matched with people who have an idea of ramping up industrial policies at a massive scale.
Okay, Pierre-Etienne, you want to add something? China is a country you pretty well know as well.
No, but it's sad, but it is true that China has a very strong drive, and they're moving with a very centralized approach to things, and they're moving at scale immediately, and they do the trial and error at scale. And this is exactly what we need in Europe as well. And the risk we have is that Europe has shown the way with the right systemic view, but US through entrepreneurship and China through government-led leadership are going to be faster if we do not execute rapidly the vision of Europe. So basically, it's like if we are doing the narrative and the others are implementing it. So we just need, now that we've done the narrative, to make it happen. That's only that. And we should not, we are so complicated, so cumbersome in the way we manage it. The IPCEI is a very nice thing, but it's very complex. You look the effort that has to be done to get the approval by the European Commission to have a derogation to the state aids, which is all driven by the way Europe has been built in the first place. So we need to be more directive. We need to be far stronger in the execution of those visions. So I could not agree more with Thierry on that.
Okay, thank you. Let's turn the floor now again to Bruno Jamet from Vehicle of the Future Cluster. Do we have any questions, Bruno?
Yes, just a little question about the competitivity in terms of price of H2 in China versus diesel price. What's the situation currently, and is it a driver, or are there other drivers? For maybe Thierry or Pierre-Etienne.
Well, I think the hydrogen is lower cost than in Europe today. It's close to 5 or 6, I think, equivalent euros per kilo. It's still more expensive than diesel, but there is a strong subsidy to the truck manufacturers and a strong subsidy on the station setup. So we have the same issues long term than with diesel, but where I diverge from what Thierry is saying is that I think, yes, the price will go down. I don't think it's going to go down so fast and so aggressively than what he says. But I think also that the regulation is going to put everyone at the level playing field, accepting that the cost of energy in general is going to be higher for everyone. And that's a society choice. So it doesn't prevent us from doing what needs to be done to reduce the cost of hydrogen. But I don't think the parity is a parity with something that in the end is going to be banned is not the point. The issue is to get as competitive as possible in comparison with batteries typically, but diesel is going not to be anymore the key. The new normal will not be diesel. So we should not afraid ourselves too much by figures which are extremely aggressive and which might appear a little bit far down the road. We should do our job, reduce the gap, but we should also get the regulations to push everybody into a zero emission direction.
Okay, let's carry on now with hydrogen valleys in Europe, please. And before giving a speech to Patrick Knuben, we're going to watch a short video of what's going on in Netherlands.
As we proceed towards a climate neutral 2050, we are reaching the point where we put theory into practice, especially when it comes to hydrogen. So far, European efforts concerning hydrogen have been individual initiatives for the most part. The time has come for an integrated approach, to gather our best ideas and put them to work in an actual region. The European Union has identified the Northern Netherlands as Hydrogen Valley. That's not surprising. In one ride, you'll find everything you need for a green, hydrogen-based economy. Sustainable energy sources, generation, storage, transport, as well as applications in industry and applications in mobility and our day-to-day environment. This time, the project partners are not researchers, they are makers. They will make the hydrogen economy flow. To achieve this, the project comprises of 4 clusters and will be realized by the end of 2025. With the region's green power converted to hydrogen, we will be working on storage and infrastructure, making hydrogen a raw material for our industry, turning hydrogen into heat and power for residential areas. And it will give us mobility, green mobility. This sectoral integration is rarely seen. We are doing it, right in this valley. We are progressing on some 30 sub-projects we have prepared over the past 2 years, hand in hand with public and private parties. We're working hard to set an example for Europe to follow. Hydrogen Valley.
So we get back to Patrick Knuben. So now it's time to explain what is a new energy coalition, how you organize and how you try to work with other regions or countries in Europe.
Yes, thank you very much, Laurent. Well, a new energy coalition is a relatively recently established organization consisting of 3 merging parties, but our goal is to actually contribute substantially to the energy transition. And we were, let's say, we have a long history, because we're actually on top of the largest onshore gas field in Europe, the Groningen field, which has brought a lot of prosperity to the region, and also has been tapped on to bring, let's say, methane, so natural gas, to all different regions in Europe. But now we are going to step out of natural gas. So based on the principle that the region needs a business, we think that we can make our business from another molecule other than methane. We are going to look into the possibilities of hydrogen, and especially green hydrogen. And therefore we set up this project, and we are very proud and very thankful that the European Commission, and especially the FCHU, has seen that we have a very interesting integrated approach in which we try to combine all the projects. And I have to say the video gives an indication on how we approach things. And looking at that project, it's 31 parties, I think 30 projects, and a total investment volume of approximately 90 million euros, going to 100 million euros. And we receive a contribution for that from the EU and the state and the region to make the industries take the step, because it's an initiating model. But the interesting thing is, as I said, this project is about 90 million euros. Now, the industries in the region have collected themselves and prepared a step up from that. And that's about 8 billion euros investment program in the region, aiming to decarbonize and to defossilize industry, and taking along on the path mobility and the built environment. So it's nucleating interest, it's nucleating activation of the industry. And on the other hand side, we try to share our knowledge and share our experiences to, let's say, the hydrogen community in Europe and outside Europe. And that we are doing through the idea of connecting to other regions who want to be hydrogen valleys. And indeed, hydrogen valleys may seem relatively small, but if you have 30 or more in Europe, it's beginning to get somewhere. And the idea behind it is to also stimulate regions in stepping in. It's not only about hydrogen valley, it's about the big picture. It's about what we are going to do next. And this is what we achieved until now. And the project is running quite smoothly, I have to say. It's not always a pleasure to manage 31 parties, you can imagine. It's a day job, but it gains a lot of interest from politicians, but also from industry and from Brussels and from banks. So the prophecy is fulfilling itself. It's starting, and very important is, in our respect, we want to have public acceptance. You have to explain what you're doing. You have to explain what you're going to do with the hydrogen. Otherwise, if you miss that, there will be some, let's say, unclarity. And of course, the region is full of energy, and we try to facilitate that. But there's another thing. It's not only about designing and constructing the installations and getting this hydrogen economy rolling. It's also about, you can build it, but you also have to maintain it. So we have educational programs from the vocational level to academic level to have young people and elderly people as well experience hydrogen so that they can be upskilled and reskilled, because we need to be prepared for this new future. And we are not there yet, because, you know, there's always something coming along which you think, well, why didn't we think of that? But in general, I think we are also reaching out to other regions, also in France and in Spain and in Germany and in Denmark, to connect. It's all about also gathering and exchanging knowledge and experiences, because it's not always a cakewalk. There are things which could go better. There are things which, well, are going well. So we need to share our experiences. And so what we've tried to do here, and which we're actually doing, is by this identification that this is a hydrogen valley approach, we see that other regions are coming to visit us and actually want to see how we do things, and we want to share it, because otherwise it doesn't work. And then it gradually grows, and that's our approach. But we are, let's say, quite proud that we have received this title, if you will, and of course the funding to do it. But if you look at what it has resulted in this next step to a region which is going to have an investment plan of 8 billion euros, and of course we need to tap on the North Sea, and we need to import hydrogen, because the energy hunger of Europe is larger than we can produce solely on the North Sea or solely in other places. So we need to reconstruct our energy system, our renewable energy system, and that's what we are doing. And we hope to, let's say, also to exchange our knowledge, but also gain experiences from other regions, because we're not alone.
Thank you, Patrick. Any comment in the panel?
Yeah.
François, yes, please.
François speaking. Yeah, that's let's say that's very close to what I mentioned, that what is growing in the Burgundy-Franche-Comté region, I think, because we have several let's say projects emerging from several cities in the region, all gathered together by the region, which is very active, and connecting and building, let's say, large ecosystem with several players, several hydrogen producers, showing that at a rather large scale, merging local transportation, industrial needs, and so on, you can have quite a big system emerging from the, let's say, local needs and local initiatives. And I think that's a good combinations. Even if Thierry don't like the valleys, I think that very, 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 let's say, It's a pragmatic approach. You have the problems, you have the consumers, you have all the funding units, you have the political will that can go directly to something that is concrete and that grows rapidly. And I think that's what is the low carbon and green hydrogen economy today. So I thank you, Patrick, for the demonstration.
Yeah.
Okay, let's see with Bruno Jamet from Cluster Vehicle of the Future if we have any questions. Bruno,
Yes, this question is about all the hydrogen that will be produced in the Netherlands. How will this be stored? It will be stored underground storage or gas network?
Well, these are, let's say, it's a very good question. And let me be clear, we are not the whole Netherlands. We are, let's say, one part of the Netherlands comprising of 3 provinces, approximately, I think, 20 to 25% of the landmass. So we are a fairly large portion of it. But the hydrogen produced is going to be green. In the project will be full green. It's a challenge, but we'll get there. And the storage will be in on the ground salt caverns. We have, let's say, vast cavern, places where the hydrogen can be stored in sufficient volume, as it is done now with natural gas. And there are other things going on, because we are also, let's say, the origin of the hydrogen backbone, because we are going to refurbish. The parties are going to refurbish the existing natural gas pipelines to bring the hydrogen to the user centers in the Netherlands and outside of the Netherlands.
Okay, let's come now to the last part of this webinar. And I turn the floor to Thierry Lepage, because we at least going to discuss ideal initiatives. So in secret for 2 years, many key players have been working together. So can you please explain us what ideal is all about?
Ideal brings about 40 companies from across the value chain, which share the same ambition and the same vision, is to make hydrogen at scale at a competitive price. And then again, it's very clearly defined as 1.5 euro per kilogram delivered. Why? Because that's where industry, where off-takers in energy or even in mobility want to buy the product. And if we want to sell our product, we cannot do it without having customers. That's an issue. You know, if you don't have customers, it's an issue. So who's behind that? You have a combination of solar developers, including my own company. There's a newly founded company, DH2 Energy, which is a solar, Madrid-based solar company that has secured 10 gigawatts of projects in Spain right now, and is engaging into not only project development, but also marketing that hydrogen to off-takers. But we have other solar developers from Tunisia, from France, from Italy. We have electrolyzer OEMs. We have mostly, European companies. We have McPhee, we have John Cockrell, and some others. We have engineering companies, Technip and Vinci, among others. And then we have gas TSOs. It's fundamental here. You know, upstream is very important. Midstream is critical. And infrastructures, as was underlined, is really fundamental. Infrastructures means transmission and storage. So we have Enagas, we have GRT Gas and Terega in France. We have Snam from Italy and OG from France, from Germany. And then we have off-takers. We have Repsol, we have Naturgy, we have that's in Spain. We have, most importantly, also, as well, steel companies like ArcelorMittal. We have BASF and many other companies. EPH, a very large power company as well. And then we have infrastructure funds, and the European Investment Bank is part as well of this work. What has been done for the last year? All these people have worked to design a system that can produce and deliver the hydrogen at the right price, and to resolve, to work on solving all the issues, which are how do you get the product and where? You know, I gave you the reason why Spain, or potentially Spain, Portugal, and potentially Morocco and Tunisia are the only options if you want to produce the product at the right price. But obviously, then the question is, where do you get the gigawatts of electrolyzers? The goal of Hydeal is to reach 3.6 million tons of hydrogen delivered by 2030, 95 gigawatts. So it's close to it's an 80 billion euro project. So it's pretty big project. It's not one single project. It's more the aggregation of different projects and converging into a vision. And then we need to overcome the issue of the deployment of infrastructures. The European hydrogen backbone here is absolutely essential. Announcements were made just a couple of weeks ago regarding the deployment of 40,000 kilometers of dedicated hydrogen pipes. That's going to be absolutely instrumental in making this project work, because you want to bring the very, very cheap hydrogen from Spain and Portugal to off-takers in Germany, for instance. There is immense demand in Germany for that Spanish and Moroccan hydrogen. And by the way, it will go through France or Italy, both ways. So that's where I'll take it. And then most importantly, the story that is being built right now, it has a local story as well. But when you think about a steel company that said, I'm going to put billions of euros in different plants to convert my steel mills to DRI, direct reduced iron. We're talking about for each steel plant between 1 and 3 billion euros of investments to make those plants not close like they risk being closed in 5 or 10 years from now because of the carbon emission, but something which will produce zero carbon steel. There's an example outside Hydeal recently with SSAB, which announced the production of green hydrogen to supply to Volvo to make hydrogen zero carbon cars. Customers want today, they want 100% zero carbon cars. They want zero carbon power on a 24/7 basis, not just part of the time, and they want it in an affordable way. So this downstream thing and how we bring together the key value chain players of the downstream and turn European industry, which is suffering so much today, chemicals, steel are suffering, companies are being closed. We have an opportunity of industrial revival. So the message behind Hydeal is not just like, let's go mass scale. It is, we can revive our local territory, not with government money, that won't do the job. We can revive it with industry, good, old, dirty, if I may say, industry that we forgot about. We thought that now it was best to produce handbags. France is the #1 country in the production of handbags and perfumes. This is fine. We need better. And we cannot just say that Europe is going to be a province of luxury goods and industry will go to China. We have to re-industrialize, and what we're doing at Hydeal, based on a number of projects, the steel mill in Spain, we're talking about the light hydrogen in southwestern France to produce power from green hydrogen. It is this industrial revival, which fundamentally needs a business model and needs the financing. So there again, Pierre-Etienne, we're going to need your support in all these projects, because there's plenty of business opportunities. So let's have a conversation, and plenty of projects, of sub-projects within Hydeal, which are concrete projects, which are now emerging, which bring together upstream, midstream, and downstream, and which are going to show the world that industry can be done in Europe. We don't need just to stay put, and go for luxury products and tourism in Venice and the rest. We can do better. We can do heavy industry, and we can do it here in Europe.
So Pierre-Etienne, maybe the first investment could be done in Hydeal?
Well, this is sure that we absolutely need to get a better view of the situation. The only topic is to make sure that we don't go into pricing. We are not going to make any profitability for the project. So this is the big topic.
Okay.
Instead, we will of course discuss with Thierry in the near future, that's for sure.
Okay, thank you. One word, François, to see about the importance of supplying green electricity in order to get some massive green hydrogen.
Yeah, just as you understood, you understand that my philosophy and the philosophy in EDF is not what Thierry mentioned a bit before. We obviously do not do the same mathematics. Let's say the balance in economy is that do you have to transport the molecule or do you have to transport the electricity? If you transport the molecule, you can have, let's say, at scale sites with big electrolyzers. If you transport the electricity, you can get the benefit from the very low cost of transportation of electricity. That means that in Europe, you don't pay for the transport of electricity depending of the number of kilometers you do with the electricity. You just pay for the point of consumption you have. That means that transporting electricity does not rely on the number of kilometers you do. That's why our view is that you just have to put the electrolyzer quite, let's say, in quite proximity with the consumers. And then if you have to transport the molecule, depending the kilometers, that's on the finally smaller areas. So we don't do the same math, obviously, than Thierry. And the second point, which is your point, Laurent, if you put electrolyzer near the consumers, how do you bring green electricity to the electrolyzers? So this is what I said. You have to combine to bring, let's say, low cost and stable cost electricity to this electrolyzer. You have to combine green electricity coming from France, probably local areas, because today you have to combine both to be eligible for public aids, and probably also areas where specific plants, I don't know, hydro plants, waste plants, and so on, near the electrolyzer. You combine all that in a contract. That means that you don't build renewable energy for hydrogen. You have renewable energy everywhere in Europe, and tons of renewable energy. So you have that, but you combine contracts with many electricity producers, and you bundle that with balancing electricity facility to provide a good energy supply to the electrolyzer next to your consumer.
François, thank you for this comment.
I think let's be clear. I mean, the cost of transmitting molecules is 10 times less than an electron. 10 times. The cost of storing a molecule is 1,000 times less than storing an electron. These are facts. These are facts. This is not an opinion. These are facts. This is the reason why we import natural gas from Siberia, 5,000 kilometers away, through pipes. We don't have the Siberian dams supplying power to Europe, because it wouldn't work. It wouldn't work economically. It wouldn't work technically. So we have to wake up to this, is that moving electrons is a very bad idea. And you know what? It won't happen, because the economics are not there. So if we're stuck in this, we're going to be the losers, the absolute losers. Europe has to wake up. Europe has to go for numbers. Today, there is an absence of looking at actual numbers, and these are facts.
Just two facts.
We'll organize maybe next debate between you about this point. But I'm sorry, but we have to conclude. And for the last time, we're going to join Bruno Jamet to see if we have some questions from the audience. Bruno, please.
Yes, though there's no more question, but I would like, I really appreciate the discussions, even if people don't always agree, and also when it's not mainstream thinking, that's okay for me. So thank you to everyone.
Okay, so let's come to the conclusion right now. Thanks again for all the speakers for being here with us. It's been very interesting, very rich discussion. So I would like to remind you that the next webinar will be on May the 25th, and it will be in French. So we're going to discuss financing, but it will be in French. So this is the name, Financement en français. But for those who speak English, never mind, we'll have a next event in June about new skills and new competencies and new jobs. So you can save the date, it will be on June the 24th. And of course, don't forget for the physical event in Belfort in the east of France. It will be on the 29th and the 30th of September. So in a few months from now. Thanks again for joining us. It's been very interesting. As you can see, hydrogen is really something which is so intense. We can see that deployment is on the way. Some people still think it's something for the future. It's not mature. But no, really, we can deploy and scale up much more quickly than you can expect. Thanks again. See you. Take care. Bye-bye.